What's going on, YouTube? Well, more cars. We're gonna do Greenlight and Autoworld today, and picked up some good ones on the trip. Got some, had a few stores that along the way that I stopped at. So let's take a look. We got Greenlight. We got Autoworld. I got this new mix from Autoworld. Let me pull out the box real quick. So we got. I found a 70 RT Challenger. This car is a big block car. It's a 440 car with a 6-pack on it. So you have 3 2-barrel carbs on this one. Let's take a look at the package real quick. There she is. So this one's done in a blue. I like the blue. And had a nice stripe on it. Had the shaker hood. And of course I missed out on the wagon. Supposed to have the 69 Kings, but I can't find it. I'm getting beat to the punch on those, but that's okay. So let's take a look here at the car. Very, very nice vehicle. I think this was done very good from Autoworld. One of my favorite castings, really, of this car. The stripe detail is done very nicely. And so is all the other graphics on it. Let's see if we can get a better view on there. Alright. So, 1970 is a new body style for Dodge. Plymouth Cuda is also on this. They redesigned the Cuda, and basically the Challenger was brand new for 70. What a cool car. They wanted a pony car that can compete up there, especially with all the new racing series going on and stuff. And you can see how the shaker hood is done very nicely. It's got a very nicely deep recessed grille, and that did change after 71. The car got a little bit goofier. They're trying to stay current. They're trying to make this body last a few years before it got outdated, but they should have just probably stayed with the 70 car, because that was the best looking one. You can see how good the grille looks. The other thing I really liked about this casting and the markings was the Dodge Star that they did in that time period, basically 60s to the 70s. You can see the body lines are pretty good. And this does have the hockey stripe type deal, kind of the side stick stripe here. They had a bunch of stripes you can get. You can get a painted hood too. You could get a bumblebee stripe on the back. You could get the TA stripe. If this was a TA, it would be a little bit different. It'd be the quarter stripe kind of going, terminate there. So this is the black interior. Steel roof car, not vinyl. There's another option. These windows in these cars would go down. These rear windows too. They'd be on a roll-up mechanism, just like the front door. Rallies. These are Mopar rallies. These are relatively small rims for the day. So even though the sidewall on this tire is enormous, they're kind of on these Autoworld. And this is an earlier casting from a different time. I mean, they've been changing their tires, but this is the older style tire that they did. They have this also on the Dodge Dart as well. You could see there. Nice deep casting. The card art says this is one of 5,500 cars, so fairly limited. I've seen as high as 7,000 some odd on the series. Let's take a look at the hood. This is a 440 car, so it'll be a big block. They also had 383, 273. They had inline 6, slant 6. So, and they also had the Hemi for its 1970. So a lot of drivetrains. This car had many, many different styles, many combinations, many color combinations you could do, because the vinyl roof could be a color, a certain number of colors. So could the interior, and obviously so could the exterior. So especially in 1970, Chrysler had a really huge color palette, and that's kind of where these cars get rare, not only for the engine and drivetrain combination, but they could have all sorts of colors on this car. And that 1 of 1 or 1 of 10, 1 of 5 cars could happen quite easily just because of the fact that the coloring could be so unique. I mean, you could have many, many different combinations. You can see the rear quarter barrels. There's Dodge right there where it's supposed to be. This one had the quad exhaust tip, so it's a dual exhaust setup. On these cars, you could get these tips. They're kind of squared off tips. So that's pretty accurate. So always a fan of this casting. And when we look at the other two Chrysler bodies that I got a 73 and a 70 TA. And in 70, you could also get a 340 car, which this one was. And this was the TA car, so it would be based off the Trans Am series car. They had to homologate. You could see that the exhaust system is the TA exhaust where it's side exit, whereas this one is full dual all the way out the back. And these cars are typical Chrysler. They're unit body construction. It wasn't body on frame. It was a unitized construction. It had basically a big K member up here that would bolt onto the subframe. It's like a subframe. And of course it had very famous Chrysler front suspension, these long torsion bars that were basically how the car, basically the springs for the car was that torsion bar. It would have shocks, but that's how the suspension was set up on these cars. And it would have rear leaf springs, so kind of a cheap setup, easy to mass produce. You know, it handled pretty decently. And there's that deep grill. This was another shaker car. Or not shaker, but ram air car. So you can see how Autoworld does all the hoods differently. And of course we have the ugly and gangly 73. And I just got this car, guys. It looks like such a great car. It looked like a car that you'd see on the side of the street, kind of parked somewhere. Some old lady probably had it for 40 years, only goes to the grocery store, you know. There's always those cars. I've seen Firebirds like that, Challengers, two-door Chevy, like Malibus. It's always that old lady that bought it back in the 70s and just kept it because they never drove them. So that car reminded me of that. So I was glad that Autoworld produced something that way. All right, so there's my Challenger story, and I'm sticking to it. And we'll put that over there. So Autoworld, this is what the Kingswood released. So if you see this particular Challenger, look for that Kingswood wagon, everybody's favorite. All right, next, another older casting from Autoworld. This is the 66 Mercury Cyclone GT. Very rare car in real life. Comet Cyclone. A Mercury Comet, first of all. Not as much as the Ford counterpart, the Ford Fairlane. What was good about this car was it was a Ford Intermediate. It comes in the same grouping as the Challenger. But, you know, it wasn't really a full-size car, but you could put a big block in it. So by 1966, there was a horsepower war already going on with all the big three in terms of muscle cars and amping up the horsepower. They're finally starting to get the green light from the executives in terms of, you know, putting bigger motors in these cars and stuff like that. So this was no exception. The Mercury division of Ford, they were getting their good motors too, and they had a few tricks up their sleeves. This car, you know, you get a 390 Ford in this car, and it was basically a Fairlane. So bigger than a Mustang, but definitely, certainly smaller than the Galaxy. And Mercury Monterey, as the full-size Mercury was back then. Great looking car. It's a fastback car. The Mercury had, even though it shared this type area with the Ford car, windshield, pillars, all that stuff, doors. Front end sheet metal was different. Doghouse was different slightly. Hood was different. Grill and headlights are all different. The Comet back then had these really interesting stacked headlight designs, full circle, whereas the Fairlane, these headlight buckets were pushed in a little bit further. So the Mercury has a very unique look to it. Let's go closer and look at the tampo work and how the body fitment is. This is a mild custom car. It has torque thrust wheels on it with BF Goodrich radial TAs on it. So I like this tampoing from Auto World. I think these tires look good. It's in a small rim diameter, which would be appropriate for this car. A lot of these guys that do these cars might freshen them up, but we'll put these torque thrusts on, but they're not running a big rim size. They're probably running a 15, 16 inch at the most. A lot of them keep the stock brakes and stuff, so these wheels and tires fit good with the stock running gear. You could see that Mercury front end, very unique, even though it is, you know, a Fairlane basically. Very funny license plate. It says Haley's, and that's obviously to harken back to Haley's Comet. And this is a Comet. You got your lower stripe there done very nicely. That was something that Mercury you could put on their car. This orange tone, I'm not sure if it was on the color palette for 66 on Mercury. You could see the Comet badge back there and Mercury strewn across the back deck. So that's all accurate. Black vinyl interior. Nothing to write home about. Sometimes Auto World does really cool interiors. They'll change color or they'll paint the color to match the exterior. So definitely something to look out for, but I never sometimes it seems like their recent releases, they have black interiors a lot of times. The other thing about this, the Cyclone, Comet Cyclone, wasn't a hypo basically package on the Comet, and then you could see basically this little graphic there would be a little cyclone, little like a little tornado graphic with the Mercury there, so it's kind of cool. This would have been your vents for the hood. I forget if they were functional or not. A lot of the times in this early part, these hoods were not functional yet, but they were starting to get there, especially towards the late 60s, but it was common for them just to have kind of like a trim there. And the motor, this is supposed to be probably a big block, but it is deep in there, but the motor is not that detailed. But I do like the inner fender wells. They look very nice. They're very, very good looking. So there's our 66 Comet, and I've had this one in the collection for a long time, back out. So they have a brother now. So this one was a very cool car. The reason I got this one was because of the color scheme, the purple and the stripe, and it has the steel wheels, has the Firestone wide oval tires, so a little bit more factory looking, and has the same detail, of course. So they'll be good together on the shelf in that Mercury Ford area, I'd say. So not too many of these done. They did have, I think, a baby blue one, which I was not interested in. You know, it's kind of hit or miss in terms of what castings I'll get. But it is a rather rare car, so it's nice to have a couple of examples in the collection. So there it is, Ford history. And just like with the Challenger, this car, you know, you get a 3 or 4-speed stick. You get automatic, which at that time was a 3-speed auto. So a lot of options, you know, you get power brake, power steering on this car, you probably get air conditioning, you have buckets or a bench seat. You could put a vinyl roof on it, so a lot of cool stuff this car would do. So very nice looking. This is exactly how it came out of the package. I didn't do anything to it. I didn't clean up the wheels or any of that stuff. So very nice casting from Auto World, one of the better ones, I'd say. And yeah, so park that over here by the Chrysler Corporation car, and let's move on. Okay, so what are we gonna look at next? Well, I got caught up on some Greenlight castings. We got some Mecum auction cars that look really cool. I got a Barrett Jackson car, so these are really great in terms of Greenlight's picking out some rarer stuff. They're not just doing straight up muscle cars or exotics. They're doing trucks now fitting into this. They're doing kind of rare production vehicles. Some are custom. still, not just completely stock. But we'll start out with the stock vehicle. I'm pretty sure this is a stock one. So 1977, this is the last year for the Bronco in this body style, and 78 through 79, etc. It went to the F Series truck. You know, the Bronco was kind of its own deal when it debuted in the 60s in this body. And this was, you know, along with Jeep, really the few vehicles you can get from a factory that was like basically ready to roll, small off-road vehicle that wasn't an enormous truck or a heavy off-highway vehicle. So a light utility four-wheel drive, like Jeep and Willys, and then later an AMC, where you could get a smaller engine, four-wheel drive, smaller body, much more maneuverable vehicle. Still could do its work and be utilitarian, but also at this point in the Bronco's life, they're really trying hard to make it more comfortable. They were adding a lot of things like power steering and brakes, automatic transmission, air conditioning, radio, two-tone interior, that type of stuff. So this is a 77 Ford Bronco Ranger trim. Ranger, of course, being the gussied up version. There's the real one. It's got the Ford wheel covers on this picture. It looks like the paint job is a little bit darker in the picture than it is on the truck that they replicated. This is Mecum Auctions. This is, I forget what series this is. It's basically the most recent one that came out. Now, the vehicle sold for 77 grand, so, you know, sometimes these uncut Broncos, meaning uncut, meaning this part of the fender is uncut. A lot of these either rotted away or for ground clearance, entire clearance, they'll cut that and make it basically the size of the fender in the front, and they'll just put a cheap fender flare on it. And a lot of them are cut up like that. But the uncut Broncos, the ones that survived, are very rare. So this one was a restored vehicle. It looks like one of 294 with that paint code. It's at a 302 small block, 4-barrel carb, which was the hypo option because you could get a 2-barrel on this too. It was a 4-wheel drive, power steering, power brake, bucket seats, like it says right there, the uncut fenders. So again, that's a big thing when you're a Bronco person, especially what's called the early Broncos, which are these. Basically mid to early 60s on to 77, they used the same vehicle. So let's take a look at it. I'm very happy about this one. I've held off on this casting because, unfortunately, Greenlight did a lot of funky colors. They did a lot of silly cars like police cars and stuff like that. Funny liveries. They would do a lot of the running on empty series, the gas stations. I just wanted a kind of a stock one with an unusual color. And I think I got what I was looking for in this release. So very happy to have this. It's got the whole package on it. Basically, this is your stripe for your graphics package. It has Bronco on the side. It's got the molding, the trim molding up there on the upper level of the body. The grille is done very nicely. So, you know, there's really not too many issues with this vehicle. Of course, it has Greenlight's earlier wheel and tire package. So, very, very big, huge tires. And I was thinking I'll probably take these off and use Greenlight's packaged tire set. They have the early wheel cover tires. I might put those on there with skinnier tires. I think it'll look nice. There's the Mecum Auction sticker on the windshield, which you'll see. Now, if you don't like that, you can take a little bit of brake fluid on a Q-tip, and that'll come right off. They do the door hinges on this car, which I thought was really interesting. They molded that in. Now, this is a plastic top, but it is not removable because it's part of the windshield and the side windows. So, unlike the K5 Blazer and the Trail Duster / Ram Charger, this top doesn't come off. The other thing I liked about it was the spare tire cover. It has the Bronco graphics there, which I thought was really cool. You'd always see these spare tire covers with that Bronco on there, so I like that. It's got the correct tail and reverse lights. Of course, Ford is behind the spare tire, but it's molded into the tailgate. You can see Ford right there, so really awesome. And of course, there's that nice orange paint. And the other thing I liked about this was you could see how they two-toned the interior. And they had the dash color the same as the body, which was correct. And so the same thing with the door panels. Most of that was metal still. Not padded vinyl or any of that. So really, really cool. Again, Ranger package would have been a very high optioned package. So this is a 4-wheel drive, 302 small blocks, probably an automatic transmission. This had the 4-valve carb, so it was very good. I mean, relatively lightweight. Even though this was a body-on-frame vehicle, it still did really good. And it had solid axle in the front, so was not an independent. Solid axle front and rear, coil spring. Very, very nice. It had leaves in the back. So very, very nice. Had a good turning radius because the wheelbase was very short. I mean, compared to a CJ-7 Jeep of the day, I mean, it was very close to that. Very, very close. So there it is. The only thing that killed it off basically is people wanted more creature comforts, and the F-Series based Bronco went out the day, and it was an easy upgrade for Ford to do. A lot of the development had been done, so transferring it to the Bronco was a no-brainer. So there we go, full of 4-wheel drive history there. Good to have it in the collection finally. 4-wheel drive Bronco. Alright, so next we are going to look at this really cool Jeep. This I thought was a 70s thing, but it looks like it has a really cool history to it. So let's look at the package before we look at the truck. These are hanging on the pegs. I thought this might be more of an exclusive, but it's not. So they're starting to hang this up, which is cool. This is also the set. This is the Barrett-Jackson Series 4. They have the C10 lifted truck, which is really cool. It's a 1969 two-tone. I didn't get that. Once I find it, I'll probably get it. It's like an orange-red versus white or over white. So this is really cool. This is a truck that was done, and you can take a screenshot of this. Basically, it was a custom for Gary Sinise's foundation for charity. And there it is getting auctioned off. And you could see, obviously, for charity, $1.3 million on this truck. So a huge, huge price tag. And it was for charity, so that was really cool. But not a very heavy-duty truck. I mean, it only had a 4-inch lift. And they kept the basic Jeep drivetrain. So this was a 258 inline 6, the famous inline 6. And back then, I think it was a 4.2 liter. It went down to a 4 liter once Chrysler took over. But back then, and this is a 1981 CJ-7, 258, basically a 4.2. And it had a Borg Wagner 3-speed, so I mean, it really wasn't a high-performance vehicle. It was great torque. And when I had my 4-liter Jeep, it was amazing. And I was lucky enough to have a stick shift one, so it made it even more fun to drive. So this is the package that they did. Really awesome stars and stripes. You can see how finely done the stars are. Let's get it up in the light real quick. So, pardon my shaking hands here. Hold on. So, top comes off just like their Laredo release of the CJ-7. So, very, very cool. White. This is all plastic. And it gets tampoed out in the right colors. You get the Jeep crest there. Let's see if I can zoom in on it a little bit better. There we go. BF Goodrich radial TA or mud trains. Tampo. There's a graphic in the back there. You can see that the axle is pushed back, and that's a hallmark of this casting. What we can do to fix that is basically we'll have to cut this out and move the axle forward. So just take a Dremel and can do it. If you really bother, it kind of bothers me. And it is something on this casting because if you look at my Laredo, it pretty much does the same thing. So you can see how it's back a little bit. So just a little bit of a issue with this casting, and it's a fairly new one. But Greenlight, besides that one issue, the scale on this vehicle is perfect. The roundness on the hood, because these CJs have a kind of a roundish edge to these hoods, and the Greenlight did that perfect. It does the headlights good, the bumpers, and even the big fat tires look nice on these. They did the windshield wipers correctly. They stick up like that. They never fall flat. So I like the casting. I like CJ-7s because they do a CJ-5, but the CJ-5 really is based on the old Jeep wheelbase, which is really tiny. So this is definitely more like a modern sized Wrangler. This is where really basically the dimensions for the Wrangler came from. And they just expanded on it after all these years. It's got the old tube bumper, which is very, very used many, many times on these Jeeps, tube bumpers. It's got the stock rear ones. Of course, they're hollow. Let's take off the top real quick. Zoom out real fast so you guys can see, and gals. So, cool. All separate. You know, they glue the seats in, the dash, the steering wheel. So there's some crookedness to it, but they're very nicely molded, and they kind of knew that this top would come off, so they tried their hardest. There's your spare tire. This is the 258, but you can get a 301 V8 on this Jeep in this time frame. They dropped the V8 in the 80s on the Wrangler and the CJs. But for a while, there were some good old times. You could get a V8 in this truck before they dropped it. And boy, that was the one to do. Definitely get the V8. So there it is. Nice Jeep. I love the stripe package on this. It almost looks like the Jeep from Airwolf. I almost thought it was the one from Airwolf, but it's not quite the same one. There was an all-American package that Jeep did. Many manufacturers did, but Jeep was one of them, and they had a really cool setup. So there she is, Jeep CJ-7. All right, next we're gonna look at one more car. This is part of the series. What was it? 32 Hot Pursuit. This is the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab Crown Vic wagon. So I'm going to try to get as many of these as I can in terms of the police wagons. Of course, I have my beautiful NYPD Crown Victorious in 1988. You can see the difference. This is supposed to be a 1987, which was the last year for that front end. In 88, it went to this front end. So if you want a direct comparison, if you're kind of fuzzy in your head what they look like, it went to the rounded Crown Vic after this year. Kept the older wheel covers on this one. I love the graphics. They also tinted the windows on this. No roof rack. So, no roof rack on this. Tinted windows. The older style wheel covers. And it's got the really cool Louisiana graphics. So let's take a look at that real quick. Crime scene investigation. And when you look at these crime labs, these statewide crime labs, a lot of these are for, they'll do heavy investigation, not only for the state police, but for a lot of state agencies too. The local agencies, they might work with the federal government in certain ways. Sometimes they'll use their facilities to store sensitive evidence before it gets transported. Some of their scientific personnel are used to collect the evidence in some other jurisdictions. It just depends. So it's a kind of a cool unit in Louisiana. And a lot of state crime labs are like this because in more rural states, they don't have a lot of resources. They might group them together and kind of deploy them as needed. So this kind of represents that. This is the 1987 Crown Victoria. It's a little crooked on the back there. So I'm going to have to adjust that, but that's how it came from the package. Sometimes it just comes the way they are, unfortunately. And there's our serial number. Seems like Greenlight uses different serial numbers in different cars. Sometimes they'll print them. Sometimes they'll use a sticker. Just depends. It might happen in different plants. Who knows? But there she is, guys. 1987. Good looking car. So there we go. Just a little bit of an assortment today. We have some big Greenlight here in the house, in the collection. We are going to take a look at it very shortly. I just got to do some notes in terms of what I want to talk about. But get ready. It's coming. Got some big old Greenlights here. So I'm going to have to clear the deck, get some cars off the table, and make room. But hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and subscribing. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Your comments are appreciated. Have a great weekend. Till next time.